So yeah, this is the final empathy circle kind of Stoa training. So if you've been here before, you know the drill. Here is the spreadsheet that you can go to right now. And if you indicate, put an X beside today's date. If this is your first time here, put your name at the bottom, find some real estate, and then put an X behind or by this date. I'll just post it again for the people who came in. Here's the spreadsheet to fill out. Again, if you've been here 3 times, if you did an empathy circle 3 times, this makes you eligible towards getting a Stoa certificate, which also makes you eligible to take Edwin's training and become an actual empathy circle trainer, which is pretty cool. Let me just send it to, again, another person came in. So that's the spreadsheet that you used to fill out. What else do I need to say? There's a 2-hour event for all the facilitators. Just do, if you're an empathy circle facilitator, put empathy circle facilitation on your name, and then yes or no if you are comfortable being recorded, because I will I have to arrange the rooms properly. I think that's anything else I need to say, Edwin. I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm missing something
Yeah.
too. So I think that covered it. So yeah, if you're willing to be recorded, put the yes there, and you'll be in a circle possibly with me, and that will be a recorded circle. The rest of the circles will not be recorded. And you can put ECF if you're familiar with facilitation. You're willing to facilitate a circle, and Peter will put you into a circle with 2, 3, or 4 participants. Welcome to our Empathy Cafe. This is our 4th one in the series, and I put in a link on how to do the empathy circle process. If someone wants to copy that and post it again, because for new people, you don't see it if it was posted previously. So if you just one of the facilitators could copy and paste that periodically, that would be helpful. There's a PDF there for the steps. Who has taken part in the empathy circles so far? Just give a little hands up. You're familiar with it. Looks like most people are familiar with it. Okay, so I'll just give a very short explanation to the process, just for any new person. You can also go to that link on our empathycircle.com website to see the instructions. There's a short 1-page PDF, as well as extensive 9-minute or 24-minute video. And with the empathy circle process, I find it's the most effective first step gateway practice to learning empathy skills and listening skills and sort of the empathic mindset around dialogue and really listening to each other. And the way the process works is based on active listening, which was developed by the therapist Carl Rogers. He's considered one of the top 3 clinical psychologists in all time. And in this process, one person is the speaker. Well, there's different roles. There's a speaker, an active listener, and silent listeners, and a facilitator in the group. And the speaker, we're going to have a topic which Peter's going to post shortly, and you'll speak on the topic, and you'll select who your active listener is, and you'll talk on the topic. You'll say an idea or 2, and then you want to pause. That's usually about 30 or 45 seconds. You pause and you let the listener reflect back their understanding of what you said. And then you check, did they understand it to your satisfaction or not? If they did not understand it, you can say it again in simpler terms or in other words. And then you share it again, check, did they understand it? And if they did understand it, then you continue with your train of thought and, pausing periodically. And the goal, one of the main goals of this process is for you to feel heard and understood to your satisfaction. So do you feel like they really got what it is that you had to say? And as the listener, you're trying to have the speaker feel that they've been heard and understood to their satisfaction. And then as the listener, you're just reflecting back what the person said to in your own words, to your own understanding. And you can paraphrase, summarize, or even reflect back some of the words that they said, or you can share some of the essences, like the different feelings and underlying kind of values that the person has. You can try that. And so then we're going to have 5-minute turns. If you're done, you don't have anything else to say, after a couple of minutes, you can say, I feel fully heard. And then if you, or you'll have there'll be a timekeeper in the group, or the facilitator. They'll hold up a sign that says, that means that your 5 minutes is up. And at that point, you want to sort of wrap up what it is that you're saying, get your final reflection, and then the listener becomes the becomes the speaker. They select their active listener, and the process continues. We're going to be going for it'll be about an hour and a half doing that. Then we'll come back at about 20 till the end, and Peter will bring us back into the full group, and we'll have just we'll go and hear from each one, just get a very short debrief on how the experience was. So in terms of as a listener, I also forgot to mention, you're only reflecting back what you're hearing the speaker say. You're not, asking questions, putting in your own ideas and judgments and so forth. But when it's your turn to speak, you can say anything it is that you would like to say. There's no political correctness. Free to say whatever you like and be heard to your satisfaction. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I just wonder, do you have our topic, Peter?
Yeah, I do. So I'll copy and paste it. So let's do this. Option 1, and this is just a prompt, is so this is the title of my journal entry today. If you are not playing your own game, you're playing someone else's game, which is inspired by a quote, if you don't have a strategy, you're part of someone else's strategy. So reflect on that kind of quote, that theme, and use that as a prompt for what you want to say in your first share. And, probably after the first cycle, it's going to morph into whatever it wants to morph into. Or you can just go whatever is most alive for you if something's really alive for you.
Yeah, that's part of the whatever the topic is, you can always just talk about whatever's alive for you as well. So how is it going with making the breakout rooms? Is it just needing more time, or?
Yeah, I'm going to need another minute.
Okay. So yeah, any questions about that? I might add that we are looking at continuing the series. We have done 4 sessions. Yay, I'm getting that. Yeah. And actually, I put in the link. It's maybe put that link in again here. There's for our training, the cohort training, we have a cohort training number 6. However, that is totally full. And for this cohort, we'll be doing more cohorts in the future, and several people from this group have joined, so really glad about that. I put in a link to a Facebook page for this event. I created a Facebook page as well as Peter created the Zoom link for it. And you can go there and you can invite friends. So it's very convenient, on Facebook, you can just invite any friends that might be interested in joining us here. And I also put in a link that Peter and I were talking before what the topic would be. And I had suggested doing role plays of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, or Trump supporters and Biden supporters. We do a role play. And I just have my congressional representative, Mark DeSaulnier, here in the San Francisco Bay Area. He said he would do an empathy circle with Republicans in January. So I'm setting up a team to help facilitate these. And if we can sort of model it, it could be used in Canada or the UK or wherever you are, where we do these online, we bring 2 Democrats, 2 Republican representatives together, have a facilitator, and have them talk about how they can work together to bridge the political divide. So that's a project in the works, and you can help out with that too if you do you can join that event or take the training, and we'll be talking about that there too. So Also, remember to add the yes to make sure if you're willing to be recorded. We want to be sure you're okay to be recorded, or say no. That's good too. So that's explicit. So how are we doing, Peter?
Yeah, we're good. I'm going to put everyone in the room now. So enjoy.
And you're having 5-minute turns, remember, for facilitators. You got your signs there. Thanks.
And I'm going to.
Good to see everyone.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, Evan. Every call we're with Evan because he's explicit about the yes. So you're regular. It's great.
And I wonder
Yeah.
because our names both start with E that we somehow get groups together or something along those lines.
Oh, that could be it. It's probably alphabetical. So he's kind of sorting that. Yeah.
I have no idea how
Yeah.
the Zoom breakout thing works, but it seems plausible because we have been together every time.
The
Okay.
alphabetical, I guess.
Yeah,
that
so
would be
let's
the
do a
anomaly,
quick.
'cause-
Oh, sorry. Let's do a quick.
Go ahead,
Just
go ahead.
check in your name, where you're located. I'm Edwin Rutcham in the San Francisco Bay Area. Evan, do you want to just?
Yeah, my name's Evan McMullen, and I am located in the Detroit, Michigan metro area.
And David.
I'm David Leonard. Right now I'm outside Washington, D.C. in Camp Springs, Maryland.
Great. And Sali? No, Sal?
Sahil, yeah.
Sahil. Sahil.
It's Sahil, yeah. Emphasis on the first syllable, but it doesn't really matter. I'm in India right now. It's probably as specific as I need to be.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, welcome. So we're going to be doing 5-minute turns. And does someone want to keep time? Does anyone feel comfortable with time to have a clock there? They can, hold up something for the time. You have a timer. You got something?
The
Yeah,
watch here.
yeah, so just
Yeah.
hold that up when the time is up for the speaker. Yeah, great. And you'll be able to take 5 minutes.
Quick question. Did
Yeah.
anybody happen to copy the prompt that Peter had? Oh, wait, I can still get it. Cool. Never mind. Sorry.
Do you want to give it to us again? Because it was a little.
Yeah, so option 1 is based on the title of Peter's journal, is if you are not playing your own game, you're playing someone else's game. Inspired by the quote from Alan Toffler, if you don't have a strategy, you're part of someone else's strategy. Or, of course, option 2, what is most alive for you right now, as always.
Okay, Peter says ignore the time. That was a mistake. Okay, so just ignore that time. It's in the upper right-hand corner. So we can get started. If someone wants to speak to me, you'll get 5 minutes to talk on the topic, and I'll reflect back just to model it. So
I'm ready with the timing too.
yeah.
I'll speak
Okay, I'm listening.
on just what's alive for me right now. So start the timer. So I kind of recently fell into this whole sphere of human existence, and I'm kind of trying to figure my way around this place and piece together who's doing what, who's thinking about sort of what elements of what is going on with humans and what we can do to start to create resolution and coherence among what seems like a lot of fragmentation right now. So
Okay, so I'm hearing you sort of fallen into this space of being human, and you're kind of looking at trying to understand what's going on, and you're seeing all this fragmentation and just sort of looking at that.
yeah, and so I've kind of started a bit of like an effort to map out what I'm seeing and try to locate myself in it. And so I found a lot of this through Twitter, and I'm trying to pay attention to like the key words that sort of characterize what person X is about versus what person Y is about, and where things overlap. And I'm trying to do that to kind of construct an understanding, like a map of the landscape, so that I can place myself like, okay, I'm here at like the convergence of people who are doing things around the Stoa and people who are interested in knowledge apps and kind of alt Twitter stuff that's going on too. So
Okay, what I'm hearing is you're trying to create sort of a map of the landscape of the, the political, social, existential landscape. and then trying to get a perspective of sort of where you fit into that. And that's sort of like the project you're doing, kind of just laying that, mapping that out right now.
Yeah, I think you're actually pretty spot on in what I'm saying, and you got a little bit of a step ahead of me in saying I'm trying to understand how I fit into all of it, and I'm trying to kind of like simultaneously keep ego in check so that I don't feel like I'm like, oh, like I need to be part of this, like, you know, this needs to be about me and my place in it. I just want to figure out what maybe I have to contribute and how I can start to participate in what seems to me to be the most encouraging sort of realm of human activity that I've encountered so far. So,
Okay, so
and
sorry.
the timer's not quite up, but I do feel like I've said all that I need to say for now.
Okay, so what I was hearing is you're trying to orientate yourself in that, and it's just not about you. It's really trying to see how you can contribute to others.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
I feel heard.
Yeah. Then speak to Evan.
All right, I'm listening.
Okay. I had talked to Peter, about the topic, and I always find his topics a little hard to kind of grasp. So it's like, I don't want to be pushy. I wanted it, like, I had some topics like, how might we bridge the political divides? And he said, oh, that's too, boring and stuff. So I'm kind of curious what everybody here thinks in terms of topics.
So I'm hearing you say that you had some topics in mind when you were discussing this session with Peter, and that he found them perhaps too boring, as you put it, and that you're still interested in exploring some of those topics and what we may think of the topics in general, such as how to bridge the political divide.
And the one I was thinking, since the election in the US is coming up, would be to try role plays. So we would have 5 people to a circle, with 2 people taking on the role of pro, Trump supporters, and 2 for Biden. And then the facilitator would be a pro culture of empathy. They'd be advocating for, hey, we need a more empathic society. And we would, do this role play. And he felt that it was too that, when you do acting, it gets a little silly. He thought it might be turned kind of silly, people wouldn't be taking it serious, and he kind of wanted that serious feeling that he thinks we get here.
So I'm hearing you say that you had a sort of activity in mind to do in the empathy circle that involved role playing, where we would split into 2 groups of 2, one role playing a conservative or pro-Trump stance, one role playing a liberal or pro-Biden stance, and then the facilitator would play the role of the person trying to bring out empathy in the conversation, and that you thought this was a good idea, but that what I'm hearing is that you're saying Peter found that to potentially be a little bit campy or kitschy or something.
Yeah. It would be 2 for each side. It would be 2 pro-Trump, 2 pro-Biden folks. So the reason I was interested in that was because of, I just talked to my congressman, as I mentioned last week. He said he would take part in this. So it would be sort of along those lines. And I think it can get deep, because if you do the role play of a Republican, you're not a Republican or a pro-Trump, you start getting more insights. You do what I would call imaginative empathy. There's empathy where we're listening to, you're listening to me, sensing into me in sort of real time. And that's what I would just call, empathy. And then imaginative empathy is kind of this role playing. Oh, that's my time. Is my time up, or is that just, okay?
It's not, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you point to the difference between what you're just describing as kind of empathy versus imaginative empathy, where when you're role playing as someone with a different perspective, you have to engage the imagination while also using empathy. And that can, I think I heard you say that can be really useful, because, and I'm having a hard time remembering exactly your phrasing, but what I got from it was that it helps you kind of expand your perspective and get better at empathy.
Yeah. So I'm just curious what everyone thinks about that. But so yeah, with that, I feel fully heard.
All right. So yeah, you're curious what people think about that. Cool. So I guess that was time. So I guess I should pick someone to speak to. So I will speak to Sahil. Hey, so I kind of want, this is kind of what I do. I want to weave together what Edwin was speaking about and also the prompt that Peter gave us and see where that goes.
So, yeah, I'm hearing that you want to weave together these two threads. Yeah.
Correct. So Peter's prompt is, if you're not playing someone else's, if you're not playing your own game, you're playing somebody else's. If you don't have a strategy, you're part of somebody else's strategy, right? So let's think about how that might intersect with what Edwin is talking about. And so the thing that I notice here when I try to model Peter in my head here is that there seems to be a sort of aversion with the Stoa in general to discussing what I would describe as object level politics, as opposed to meta level politics.
Right. So I'm hearing that there's a distinction between object level politics and meta level politics in your head that you think, one of which you think Peter is ignoring and that Edwin might address.
Well, that's almost right. What I was trying to convey is not that I think Peter is ignoring object level politics, but that there is a sort of goal or character of the Stoa that he's trying to cultivate, which avoids object level politics and discusses meta politics.
Right. So, yeah. So, it's so what I'm getting out of that is that it's his vision that is about meta politics and not really that he's actively ignoring the object level politics.
Yeah, exactly. And so I find this to be an interesting tension with some of the experiences that I've shared with other people on the Stoa, that on the one hand, we often discuss on the Stoa the concept of power literacy. And yet, on the other hand, politics is, in a certain sense, the active seizing of levers of power. And so the fact that we discuss power literacy and yet don't want to discuss object level politics is sort of an interesting tension.
Right. So what I'm hearing is, like, to use your word, tension between the stated goals of understanding what power means and not engaging with the actual playing out of power in the real world.
Yeah, and it calls to mind the archetype of the sage who simply is super wise, but is not engaged with the world, in the world, but not of the world. And I find that an interesting thing that sort of says something to me about the sort of spirit of the Stoa.
Right. So if I'm understanding that correctly, you have a bit of a problem with how the Stoa is keeping things in their head and not living what they're.
Well, you got most of what I said, but I think you might have missed my emotional valence. I don't actually have a problem with this. I simply find it quite interesting to notice and am interested to speak about it and hear others' thoughts about it as well.
Right. Right. So yeah, do you want me to summarize that as well? Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm new to this. Yeah. So you also wanted to convey like the emotional aspect of it, which was that it's merely interesting as opposed to you having a problem with it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So yeah, I just think that's an interesting thing to ponder and jump off and it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately is the distinction between discussing politics and engaging in politics versus discussing meta politics and what does engaging in meta politics look like.
Right. So something that you're exploring right now is the ways distinctions between meta politics and engaging in actual politics. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. Yeah, and specifically, so we can discuss politics or we can discuss metapolitics. But what does it look like to be engaged in metapolitics? That's a question that's very alive for me right now.
Right. So the emphasis is on the word engagement in metapolitics. Right?
Exactly. Is my
You
time
guys
up?
have reached time. Yeah.
Thank you. I feel heard.
Sure.
So,
So now you choose who you want to speak to.
okay.
If you're
So
listening.
yeah, I'll go around in a cycle and speak to Edwin.
Okay, listening.
So I guess I probably have two threads that I want to talk about. One is just my experience right now of this activity, and also the actual topic of, again, an intersection between what's alive in my life right now and Peter Limburg's quote about you are being played if you aren't playing, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you have two threads that are coming up for you. One is kind of what's happening now in the moment in this circle, and the other thread is thinking about the topic that that Peter set. And so you've got kind of holding both of those threads at the moment.
Right. I think I'm a little weirded out by when I should be repeating back things verbatim when I do remember them. I mean, in context of this particular activity, and it feels almost like, am I really listening if I can just parrot it back? Wouldn't it be better if I could reframe that in various ways? And there's another point, but I'll say that right
Yeah,
after
you're
this.
just kind of curious. You're kind of noticing, is it sounds a little bit like just parroting back. Is it, is it just parroting back, or could I sort of share it? Would it convey the meaning better if I conveyed it, in my own words and maybe added something that relates or something like that? So you're just kind of like looking at the nature of what we're doing here.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel like you, Edwin, are able to do this with a cool balance that I'm not able to discern yet. But I think I'm interested, I'm intrigued by that. And I'm also noticing, the other thing I'm noticing is that when I'm listening, it's almost like I want to build on what people are saying. And I actively have to suppress it and remind myself, oh, wait, this is just listening right now. And that's a little weird to me, I realize.
Yeah, so you're noticing that there's something about the way that I'm reflecting back that maybe is catching the meaning of what you're saying, not just sort of repeating it, parroting the words back. And then you're also noticing that that when you hear someone, that you actually want to add something else, not just listen. You'd like to add your own, and you can't do that. So you're kind of like noticing sort of the energies maybe around that.
And I feel like I have like a lot of experience with empathy. And I'm not sure if I'm new to this, but I'm not sure if empathy is the word that I would be thinking about when this is. Empathy is the word that would describe what is happening right now. Maybe I need to understand what's going on. So I'm trying to reserve judgment. It's not very hard to do that, but I'm trying to reserve judgment.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an understanding of what empathy is, and you're just wondering, is this really empathy, what we're doing here? And you don't want to judge it, say yes or no, but you're kind of reserving judgment. It sounds like you're kind of just exploring trying to understand more clearly.
Yeah. I think I have a lot more to say to connect both this and the other thread that I never got to, but I think because I'm short of time, probably. David, can you 1 minute? Okay. Okay, so maybe I'll add one more thought. I'm a little wary of speaking only about the meta. Everyone here right now David talked about how he felt about engaging with these meta tribes. Evan talked about how he's worried about how the Stoa is approaching politics and meta politics. You talked about how your own plans about empathy circling and how you disagreed with Peter. And all of these are sort of meta. We didn't talk about anything except the structure itself. And I think that it worries me when people only talk about the meta.
Mhm. So you're noticing that it annoys you when people talk at sort of a meta level, not about what's really happening in the moment. And you, it sounds like you would like to talk more about what's happening right now in the moment for you.
Yeah, I think annoy would probably be too strong, but like I definitely noticed it, and I'm like, hey, do I want to move away from that?
Yeah, it's like, it's not, annoy is but maybe not quite the word. It's more like you want to, I don't, what was the last, do you want to finish that last thought?
Yeah, I was saying maybe I want to influence it in various ways.
Oh,
and yeah.
Yeah, so you'd like to move it towards talking about what's happening in the moment. Sounds like maybe you
Probably.
enjoy that more.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll speak to, thanks, speak to David. Yeah, I was appreciating what Sahil was saying about, speaking about the moment. I like talking about like what is arising, naming the felt experience that I have in the moment. So I'm really glad that he sort of shared that because when he shared his experiences in the moment, I thought, oh yeah, I enjoy this. I like hearing that.
So what I'm hearing is that you're kind of, your own experience right now is that you are enjoying sort of the direction the conversation is taking, and what Sahil was saying about how the distinctions he's making between what we're talking about versus how he's actually experiencing what's going on right now.
Yeah, and it's your 5 minutes. You can go in any direction. If you want to go meta, if you want to go in the moment, you can. And it's interesting how what we say, and how we say it sort of influences other people too, right? It's like if I would have started off speaking very personally, everybody else may have been more personal too. That's something that happens. So it's interesting the nature of the discussion, how we sort of set the tone for it. Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying is sort of the point from which we start, like the trailhead for the discussion, very much influences then where we go, where we end up, the ideas we weave through, and that other people kind of build upon what's been started from and where we've been.
Yeah, so I really like to harvest, gather, recordings of what people are experiencing in the circle, like personally experiencing, it's sort of like the landscape of the empathy circle. I used to feel very kind of nervous, oh, I got this group, I'm feeling kind of anxious. I'm getting, done so many, I'm feeling pretty calm and curious and kind of excited, right now.
So what you're saying is sort of that, you've been doing these for a little while, and your experience in the beginning was a bit different, wherein you maybe didn't have as much understanding of how other people were going to experience what was going on. But at this point, you've been doing it for a little while longer, and you've sort of started to build your mental map of how people process this experience and what it does for others, and you enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it's like just the calmness of doing it so much, you get kind of more relaxed, it's because even the last circle, somebody mentioned, oh, I feel all anxious about this. And, it's like a lot of people feel anxious at first because, you haven't done it before. You don't know who the people are. It just takes time to get comfortable. You haven't done the process before, so it can be anxiety producing.
So it's like there is like this nervousness that happens with a lot of people who come and do it, and it's their first time. And you've found now that you're in a place where you're more comfortable and calmer doing it. Even though for a lot of people, when they first do it, there is this anxiety, but maybe what you're seeing is that you can come to this calm place and experience it in that way.
Yeah, and the question of how to deepen the experience, how do we move more into the felt experience, and what is deep, how do we have a deep conversation is also sort of a question. And I think part of that is to name the felt experience. Like, right now I just feel spacious, I feel calm, I feel warm, feel relaxed, feel open. It's like curious, like, oh, that's sort of where I am at the moment. Yeah.
So I hear you talking about where you are, where your felt experience is right now, and how that sort of understanding where you are as an individual and sharing that is part of maybe what you're thinking is how we can start to deepen these conversations. And that's a question that's with you right now.
Yeah. And then again, everybody can go where they want. You're totally free. You can judge, you can name call, you can do anything you want. It's like, insult people or praise them, So yeah, I try to really make a point that you're free to say whatever you want.
So you're talking about sort of the nature of this process is such that anybody is free to make the points they want to make, and they're free to express themselves in the ways that they feel they need to express themselves. And that sort of is the nature of the process. And I get that you're happy with that.
Yeah, and the reflection, the reflection can go deeper besides just parroting, adding to what Sahil was saying, is if you sense the felt experience, you can feel into what the person is saying, and then reflect that felt experience that you're getting, so you get sort of the essence versus just the words. But, it's not judgment, you're not judged if you want to, it's really up to the speaker to feel heard, and you can just grunt. Like, oh, it's like, and if the speaker feels heard, that's totally fine. Yeah.
So I'm getting kind of two levels from you there. Is that there's sort of like a skillfulness that the active listener has in parsing the content of the words and the emotional tone of the speaker, such that you can sort of deepen the conversation by being able to experience what is being said on both those levels. And I guess I said that, and I'm sorry, I kind of lost the second half of it.
I feel fully heard. I think you got the essence.
Oh, and that was it, wasn't it? It was that it's up to the speaker to decide when they feel heard and at what level they feel heard. And you can just, if you're not.
Grunt.
We're about at time too, so.
Yeah, I feel heard, fully heard. Thanks.
Great. All right. I'm gonna break the circle that we're taking and talk to Sahil.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, we're gonna start time. So I'm really enjoying the direction this is taking, actually. And I myself am someone who has a good bit of anxiety in my life, so I'm sort of sitting with that right now, and I am finding myself in a different place from where Edwin is describing he is. But at the same time, I'm appreciating the environment that he creates with this process, and I'm feeling understood and listened to, and I appreciate that.
So largely what I'm hearing is you're really enjoying yourself, and you're someone who's had to deal with anxiety. And even though Edwin is sort of doing it in a different way, you really appreciate what he's doing and the kind of space that he's created for you and for everyone.
Yeah. And I wanted to sort of return to something you were saying, because I think I'm experiencing things similarly to you right now, wherein like sitting as a listener, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to say. I really want to build on what they're saying and add my thoughts. But then I'm finding myself like, this isn't about me. This is an experience of listening. It's about having another person give their energy in their words. And so I'm trying to kind of operate in this like reduced ego space where I don't make it about myself, and I make it about the others who are listening, the others who are talking and being listened to, not myself.
So what's happening is that you're connecting with what I said before, and also realizing that what this is really about when you're listening is connecting what the person who's speaking is saying. And you're trying to remind yourself that yeah, this is what my turn is at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, I want to try to weave Evan in a little bit to what he was saying earlier. And I guess, I'm sorry, not directly the content, but more like how I felt about it, as in like, I don't think I'm quite yet at the maybe level of understanding of what's going on with the Stoa, or the level of intellectual, conceptual understanding to make in my own mind a particularly useful distinction between what you mean by object level politics versus meta level politics. But I find myself experiencing this circle as a place to be exposed to those new ideas. And in that it is such a listening heavy process, I feel like there is an opportunity to learn from what other people want to say and what is alive with them at the moment.
Right. So you did want to weave in what Evan had to say, which was something that you didn't quite get about the distinction between object and meta level stuff happening at the Stoa, but you do really enjoy the listening heavy parts, is the phrase I think you used. Yeah.
Yeah, and a thought that was with me earlier was sort of that because no one person has all the time and no one person takes the conversation totally in their own direction, it sort of slowly levels us all up together. It sort of like takes us just a slow step forward at a time, such that anybody who needs to express that they're not quite following or they're not quite with what's being said is free to take it away, for example, from content and back to their own felt experience.
So you're saying that time, the amount of time plays a huge role in where people can take it, and anyone's free to sort of use it to take it to a place that it isn't going if they feel the need to.
Yeah, and how like if you don't quite follow, you can say, I don't quite follow, and then hopefully have a little bit more understanding built for you as you're being listened to.
Right.
And
so you're saying,
because you can, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you should go ahead.
Okay, because you can say I don't quite follow, the conversation doesn't leave you behind. And I appreciate that, because there are conversations where you can just get left behind and you don't have the opportunity to say, hold on, I didn't quite board the train.
So you feel this ability to say, okay, I'm not there yet, to the group at hand, is really making you feel comfortable in keeping up in a way.
Yeah. And I think I'm really interested in patterns personally. I know it's a very general thing, but I think about patterns all the time, and everything is patterns. And this is a particular structure of patterns that we're going through together. And I think that I feel potential in this system, and I feel potential for these sorts of practices to be learned by people. And I guess I'm just grateful to have come here to participate and be a part of this.
Right. So you love the idea of patterns, even though you know it's a very generic word, but you're enjoying the patterns here, and you feel a lot of gratitude for what this community is giving to you.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you, Saya.
Thanks, David. Cool. I will speak to Evan.
I am listening.
Okay, so I have, again, so much to say about this activity right now. That's probably valuable to both me and possibly Edwin. But I think I'm going to talk about something else, which is a one-on-one conversation that I had about 2 hours ago with someone at the Stoa named Nick Shores, I think.
So you have many thoughts on the topic that we've kind of been on, but you're actually going to go in a different direction, which is to share some stuff about a conversation you just had with someone from the Stoa.
Yeah, so I'm doing that because this was the earlier thread that I couldn't get to, and because it sort of relates to both the questions of what is live in me right now, and if you are not playing your own game, you're playing someone else's games. This is something related to collective presencing, which I'll speak about in a second.
So you're echoing back to Peter's question about if you're not playing your own game, you're playing someone else's game, and you're going to tie that together with some thoughts about the collective presencing practice.
Right. What I noticed in that practice, and I said as much, was this that the tool of choice for some reason or the other is the metaphor. Like it seemed like all people were doing was just coming up with pretty things and sometimes honest things, and that phrasing is probably important. Sometimes honest things that were being beautifully worked on and built on and massaged and taken places, and I had some reservations about that.
So it sounds like you're reflecting on your experience of the collective presencing practice, and you're finding that people in your experience there tends to grab the tool of metaphor most frequently. And that in your view, it seems that this gives rise to statements or thoughts or something like that that are often interesting and sometimes honest or true. And that particular order that you said it in is important to you.
Yeah, and I do remember we had like a private conversation, you and I, Evan, in the middle, but when I talked to Nick about was a phrase he had used earlier, which was his war on silence. And I like that because I know using metaphors is as silly or as smart as using words to describe what's going on. But I did have a certain cynicism about things that I wanted to, I suppose, address and tone down, possibly.
So you liked the phrasing that he used of his war on silence. I love that too. And that you are carrying with you a certain cynicism surrounding the way of expression with metaphor and or words, and that this is something you wanted to, I think you said tone down or address, something along those lines.
Yeah. It's so I just need a second. Yeah, so what Nick said was that actually helped was, so I described to him my experience with meditation, where when I first started out, I knew I did it completely wrong, where when I was supposed to be focusing on my breath, I was just simulating in my head, oh, this is what my lungs are probably moving like, and that's completely the opposite of meditation. It's the opposite of being present. And I felt this, so relating to Peter Limberg's thing, I felt this weird responsibility to avoid people going down that path of like distancing themselves with language, when what I thought it was supposed to be about was being present.
So what I'm hearing, and that was time, is that what I'm hearing is that you're tying this in with your experiences of meditation, where you found yourself, instead of actually being present with the physical sensations of the breath, somehow constructing a mental model of the mechanical action of your lungs, which is different because it's a model. And that you sort of were looking for in the collective presencing practice something which was less mediated by words, and more focused on some sense of presence in the moment than what you found there.
Right. Yeah. That was time, right?
Yep. Yeah, you held up the thing while you had your eyes shut. So, okay, so I will speak to David then.
Sure. Good to go.
So something that's been coming up for me, and apologies to Sahil, I'm going to use a metaphor here. So the metaphor that has cropped up for me here surrounding what we're doing here and just conversation and human interaction in general is that of a dance.
So what I'm hearing is that you, despite what Sahil has just been saying, are going to use a metaphor to make the sort of point you want to make. And that metaphor for you is of conversation as a sort of dance.
Right. And so the interesting thing about the word dance, and I just want to make a note that all words are metaphors. Every single word is a metaphor for something because it's not the thing itself. But that being said, so we use this word dance, and it refers to a whole broad spectrum of the movement of human bodies in space. And that's meaningful. But also there are many, many different types of dance. And I want to explore that for a second.
So what you're saying is that, first of all, you want to make the distinction that all words have metaphorical function in some way or another. And then you want to talk about how dance in particular is used for a wide variety of different situations, and you've got a particular one in mind that you want to go for.
Yeah, or rather a particular sort of distinction I want to point to. So when people, and this goes back to what a lot of people have said during these empathy circles, that it feels that they have, there's something that can sometimes feel unnatural because you don't just want to reflect back to someone, you want to add your commentary, your take, your opinion, right? And so that has a sort of fast back and forth feeling movement to it, right? And so if we are thinking of this as a way of dancing, you might think of it as something like a swing dance with a partner. It's very fast and dynamic, and you're constantly trading off motion between each other.
What I'm getting from you is that you're kind of hearkening back to how people have been experiencing these regarding how it's a pretty slow back and forth exchange, but the person listening often wants to add to what's been said. And that to you feels like a sort of swing dance, wherein the dynamic between the two is this very in motion, very fast kind of back and forth activity.
Yeah, and so there's a piece that I was trying to get at I might not have phrased very well. So I'll say this so to be clear, the swing dance thing is normal conversation, right? And so I want to maybe compare the empathy circle style of conversational dance to something more like a dance off, right? So I go and I do my thing, and then you have your turn, and you go and you do your thing. But the switching between the energy of the partners in the dance or the participants in the dance happens over a much slower time scale with a dance off than with swing dancing with a partner.
So you want to be sure it's understood that the faster swing dance is normal conversation, whereas what we're doing here is more like you've got a circle, you've got a group, and one person pops in and they kind of show their moves and they share what they've got to share and express. And that kind of format of conversation is a slower interchange of expressions between people.
Yeah, and to slightly shift the dance-based metaphor for a second, it's also interesting that when we are trying to get better at various sorts of dancing, we may do activities in a dance studio which are not actually themselves a form of dance. Think about people training for ballet doing bar exercises, for example, right? That's not a dance, but it makes them better at the type of dance they do. And so I sometimes wonder, maybe what we're doing here isn't even really a dance in the same sense as most conversations are, but it's a sort of training for the conversational dance, specifically a training for our listening skills and our empathy skills. because that's something that most of us are quite deficient in.
So what you're saying now is you're sort of relating what we're doing here to the non-directly dance activities that are done as sort of the scaffolding to build up the skills that go into what actually is dance. And so where we are now and what we're doing now is more of a practice or a rehearsal than it is the actual dance.
Yep. And so to kind of tie this back also with something that Sahil mentioned, I think what we're doing is actually a bit of a meditation here, because in order to reflect well and empathize well, there's a certain cultivation of embodied presence that the active listener must do. And that's what we're training here, in my opinion.
So you're tying it back in with Sahil, and you're saying that there is a particular skill set that we're trying to get at here, and you're emphasizing that that is the active listener who is basically cultivating within them the ability to be fully present with the speaker and skillfully, empathically reflect back what is being communicated.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I find this so beautiful because I've been meditating in the standard sense for about 18 years. And the more I practice, the more I find myself drawn to what I would call group meditations, where we take the act of presencing and embodiment that we cultivate through solo meditation and bring that vibe or that energy or that skill into shared spaces.
So you're saying you've been meditating for a long time, and it's an important part of your lived experience, and you find yourself increasingly drawn to these sorts of more shared meditative experiences, these community experiences where we become present, we are engaged with embodied presence in a group setting, because that sort of is an experience more of shared energy that you're finding yourself drawn to.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie that together, it's often a challenge for people. How do I take what I've done in meditation and take that off of the mat into everyday life with me? And I think that doing things like this are one way to have a smoother gradation, like a path from solo silent meditation and then something that's like in between that and just being out in the world with all of its noise and cacophony and other people. Like this is a nice like in between rest stop that we can move through in our journeys.
So here what you're saying is sort of that you've felt this need for there to be a more intermediate step between the solo meditative practice and the being out in the world engaged in completely unfacilitated, uncontrolled activity. This is like a calm place that we can come to between the solo and between the completely out there experiences that allow us to cultivate our ability to be present.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but that's what I've got. I feel completely heard.
That's perfect. All right, I'll speak to Edwin.
Listening.
So there's this common thread going on where we're all kind of talking about, I feel like, the nature of this process and the skills involved. And that's interesting to me because one of my main mental models is compositionality elements that are playing out here and how we might understand them and nudge them around a bit to make this a really effective tool.
So you broke up there for a moment, but I think you're saying that you're finding it interesting how the topic seems to be about the process that we're doing. And that is interesting to you because you're kind of looking at how to look at these type of processes and then maybe improve on them.
And specifically, I'm interested in what Evan was saying, and I'm interested in what Sahil was saying. We're all kind of hitting on the nature of the listener's role and how there is a sort of capacity that is commonly lacked in most people to be in such a state of empathic presence that you're able to like really reflect back both the feeling and the content of what's been said to that person and show them that like you're there, you're listening.
So you're noticing how we've been focusing on the listener's role, that they're really listening to sort of the deeper essence of what the speaker is saying, and kind of reflect that back to show them that they understand it.
Yeah, and I've done it twice now, and my experience has been sort of that it isn't about rephrasing, though I think rephrasing is important when you maybe just didn't quite pick up on what they meant, because it allows them to re-articulate themselves such that they're better understood if they feel that's necessary. But my experience with this so far has been like, all right, I'm gonna reflect back what you said through my own words, but with your feeling of it. And so I'm finding it important to rephrase, but be with them and how they're feeling in that level of it.
Yeah, you're sharing your experience of the listening, where you're sensing what the person is saying, and then you're rephrasing it sort of through yourself. How and to really, yeah, I think is that it?
Yeah, that's close. And
Close.
one thing that's interesting to me is that it's similar to how in learning it's very important to personalize the phrasing of an idea such that it sticks with your like current kind of neural scaffolding. And I just got a low battery, so I'm gonna plug my stuff in. I'm sorry. We good?
Yep. See you, hear you.
So that was funny because now immediately I feel like I'm in the right place to say, haha, that was a little embarrassing, but I don't feel like any of you are judging me for it.
So you don't feel like you were judged. You're maybe feeling self-conscious about that, but you don't feel like we were judging you.
Yeah, it's a great environment that's been created. And so I was saying something about how the act of putting your own words to something that's being communicated helps to give a more personal edge to it. And I think that that is part of what makes it sound more like you're really there and listening, is showing, okay, I've related what you've said to my own experience, as opposed to repeating the words, and therefore I am very present with you. And I think that's part of the skill set that the active listener should cultivate.
Yeah, so the active listener, you feel, should cultivate the skill set of really being present with the person, and the way that you convey that is to sort of take in what what the speaker is saying, and then give it back in your own words to show that you've really sort of taken it in and been present.
Yeah, I think that it reflects a sort of deeper, it reflects that you're more there than if you were just to completely repeat what they said back. Because that's like, it's like in school, if you take notes that are just exactly what's on the slides, it's like you're not going to learn it as well. So there's some sort of connection there. I'm not quite getting what it is, but that's where I am right now.
Yeah, so you really see that it's more than just the reflecting back. I mean, in terms of just sort of parroting back the words, it may be a superficial level. But you want to take it in, really hear it, be present, hear it deeply, and then show that you've really kind of grasped, the meaning of what the person has said.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And the last thing I want to add is that I think it's like you don't add your own thoughts to what they're saying, but you do sort of build it a little bit. You just take it like a couple steps forward by integrating it into yourself and reflecting it back. You don't add your own thoughts and make it about you, but you do show authentic, genuine, sincere presence by reflecting your personalized understanding back.
Yeah, so when you reflect back, you're not making it sort of about you. You're showing that you're being present with the other person, and when you're giving it back, it's sort of moving forward a bit the experience that the speaker is having. It's kind of moving what they said somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
not
so
in your own words. It's your own moving. It's sort of moving them forward in their experience.
and I like that phrasing, and I think that's something that's interesting too. Is then the speaker can be like, cool, yeah, like they've understood me and shown that, and now I can continue to step forward. And then a little bit about my own direct experience right now is I feel a little bit pedantic going on about this, but I do feel like it's interesting to really kind of hammer out what we need to do to be effective at this, because once we take it to, and I'm sure you've done this already, once you have it in a situation where we're not all kind of nice regular people who are going to be kind to each other by default, it's going to be harder. And it's going to be harder if you have people who are very, very, very far apart ideologically. You're going to need quite a bit of capacity for empathy and skillful listening to be able to effectively facilitate a much more divided group.
Yeah, so there's you on one hand you feel like, oh, this might be pedantic, sort of explaining this process, but you also see the importance of sort of understanding what's sort of happening here, because that's going to influence how well you can facilitate, people who are very polarized, and so you think it'll contribute to supporting that.
Yeah. Right. I feel heard.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Sahil?
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, so I had made a note here to talk about the definition of empathy, because you had talked about that.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
So are you asking me to listen and we're
Yeah,
continuing?
would you listen? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. I didn't know how many rounds. Okay.
Oh, we
Yeah,
just
go ahead.
keep
I'm
going for the time allotted. It's just, we just keep going for, I think,
okay.
probably
Yeah, I'm
another
listening.
30 minutes or almost. Yeah. So yeah, so it's about the empathy topic, that it was different. The definition was a bit different than you were understanding. So I kind of wanted to jump into that.
Yeah, you want to clarify that the way Sahil was understanding empathy is not exactly the way you want to talk about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know what your understanding is, because I don't think you shared it, but what the definition, I mean, there's a lot of different definitions out there, and it's sort of a morass of what people are talking about. I've been working on this for 13, 14 years. All those books are books on empathy, and it's confusing to me because everybody's using different terminology. You don't know what people are talking about when they say empathy, and it takes a long conversation to really hone in on it. So it's a bit of a morass, a minefield, a swamp, metaphorically, since we're doing metaphor.
Yeah, I'm hearing that the first knot here is of terminology, because you were not sure what my understanding was, since I didn't even communicate that, and just based on how much reading you've done and exploring you've done on your own, that it just seems like it's a swamp, a mess, a morass, and various other metaphors.
Yeah, yeah, and the definition what I'm building on is the work of Carl Rogers, who I think I mentioned at the beginning, in the full group, and he had a definition of empathy was following along with someone. You're a companion on their journey. So talking about a metaphor, like you are now following on my journey. I am going on a mental journey, going off here, and you are following, it's a faithful companion on my journey, right? It's like you're following me wherever my thoughts, emotions, feelings leads, and so that companionship, your presence is a companion, and that's what he is calling empathy, kind of sensing into what someone else's experience is.
Right. So one definition that you like is by Carl Rogers, who defines it as accompanying someone's adventures. And you talked about how right now you're just exploring, and I'm following and accompanying you. And yeah, that's one definition that you like.
Yeah, and it's not like you're saying, "Hey, Edwin, you're going the wrong direction. Don't go that direction. This is a stupid direction," or let's go this direction. I want to go this direction, and you're kind of like the kid. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like, this is boring. It's like, I don't want to do this. I don't, whatever. So those are other options to accompanying someone on their journey, right? It's like all these other things that will block you from going on my journey.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that there's certain kinds of accompaniment that you're not talking about, which is the kind where you imagine a little annoying kid saying, "Oh no, I don't want to go there," or making it about his own experience and just simply being with the person who's speaking.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're listening to me and you have an idea that you want to build on, it's like you're saying, "Hey, let's go down this road here." It's like, right? So,
Yeah.
and Carl Rogers is a therapist. He would sit with somebody. We're doing like 5-minute turns. He would do 1 hour. So for 1 hour, he would just sit and listen. It was a core to his therapy, and it's called non-directed therapy. So it's the healing aspect of just being with someone and following them on their journey so they can sort of explore their own space, their own experience, their own feelings, their own issues, and sort of, in a sense, come up with their own solutions. And it's somehow there's something magic, though, that if you do it with someone else, that you feel like you have a friend, you have a presence. There's something healing, maybe biologically wired into our being as human beings, social beings, to be with someone else. And it relieves, that you're here, that you're listening, kind of releases oxytocin, right, in me. So I have a warm feeling. It's like, and that counteracts cortisol, which is the stress hormone, right, which is, wears your body out. So that's sort of the mechanics of why this is, can be helpful. That was a lot.
So
but,
yeah, so you started off with saying that sometimes when you think you're building on what the speaker has said, you're actually saying, "Oh, let's go here," and like sort of influencing their trajectory. But the way Carl Rogers did it, and it was a therapeutic thing that he was doing, was where he would spend an hour or more with someone just reflecting back what they were saying. And you think it's more than just, even though like we're social beings and this has a profound impact, it's also, you can also see the hormonal relation to things where your stress and your cortisol and oxytocin levels change just by the presence of someone else who's reflecting it back.
yeah, I perfectly heard.
About all of what he said.
Yeah, that's it. That was my time too.
Cool. Let me pick David. I think I haven't.
Sure.
We haven't yet, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one thing I do want to add, just again suspending that thread of, I had a lot to say again about metaphor and whatever. I want to comment some more on the experience I'm having right now.
So I hear you saying is you're gonna, instead of going where you were gonna go with Evan, that other thread is you're gonna come back to your own direct experience right now and reflect more on where you are at the moment.
Yeah, it's just that there's something about specifically the way Edwin has been doing it. It makes me feel like, oh, is his trick that he's actually being empathic in a way that I understand empathy? And maybe I'll go into what I think empathy is in a bit.
So you're getting something from the way Edwin is going about this that maybe doesn't quite jive with your own understanding of empathy. And so you want to explore how you understand empathy and see if you can kind of reconcile that.
Right. So yeah, so I mean, specifically that's working out what he's doing. And I want to figure out what, and I was wondering if the trick is that he is really listening in a way that I haven't before. And that's both upsetting and really refreshing, if true.
So there's something about the way that he's listening, and you think there might be like a sort of trick to it or something that you just don't quite grasp yet. And that he's maybe listening in a way that demonstrates capacities that you aren't familiar with, or something like that. And you're not sure how you feel emotionally about that.
Yeah, and I do want to add to what you were saying earlier about, I mean, not add, but just, yeah, you pointed out how really is right now it might seem like, oh, this is kind of mundane, but it might really mean a lot when our stances are adversarial and there's a real deficit of trust.
So building on what I was saying, or not quite building on what I was saying, but you agree that there is a sort of difference between the vibe that's going on in this room right now, if I can use that word, and the sort of energetic atmosphere that would hang over a much more potentially combative encounter.
Right, yeah. And I think at first, when I was first just, when Evan just started speaking to me, he's like, and I said, yeah, I'm listening. And I realized how, for me, it was very cognitively demanding. Maybe it has something to do with my lack of sleep at the moment. I'm on like 3 hours of sleep, I think. And I noticed that even if so, when I was trying to sort of tap into what I think the empathic way that Edwin was describing earlier, when I tried it out with Edwin in the last session, it was less cognitively demanding. That might have just been a coincidence, but I think it might have been the attitude I was going ahead with, where, oh, I have to memorize all these threads that they have that don't connect in my head. They don't seem natural in my head, but seem natural to them. So I have to manually keep a track of that thread. But when I was listening to them, maybe I was seeing more of that connection, and it was just easier on me. It was a lower, lesser cognitive load.
So you are in a place right now with when you're sitting with this difference between two different styles of listening. And today, I think you're finding yourself having a little harder of a strain on your cognitive energy, your cognitive efficiency, in terms of listening to and being able to parse and reflect back what's being said. Whereas there was a different way of doing it that Edwin had earlier sort of transmitted to you, and you had a better experience sitting with the other person, following their threads, and despite it being not all connected and intuitive to you, you were able to reflect back to them a bit better.
Yeah, so I think my use of the word session was probably misleading. I meant the turn in the same session.
I see.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I think I want to go over my understanding of empathy. How am I doing for time?
You got 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. So I've spent a lot of time with something called the effective altruism movement, which is simultaneously about really diving into this general empathy for the whole world in a humanitarian, in a humanist way, and at the same time blocking off your empathy, because empathy is a distraction. When the empathy, the way your brain uses it by default, is a distraction, because you tend to focus on like cute puppies or like sad little girls, or, and whereas the problems of the world are huge and boring, and that's where you really need to intellectually extend your already existing empathy.
So I hear you making a distinction between two varieties of empathy, one of which you've been exposed to through the effective altruism movement. And on that level, it's a more sort of reasoned through way of extending empathy to larger problems in the world, larger groups of people who may be suffering. And at the same time, you're finding there's a little bit of a strangeness between that and the more emotional feeling it in the moment level of empathy. And that's something that you maybe are a bit more pragmatic about, and you want to turn that off because it's not always useful to what you're doing.
Yeah. And when I used to facilitate my own, I used to organize in my city my own effective altruism chapter, and there I gave a few talks about what I called tasteless truth, and really it's better translated as bland truth, where just like you can't laugh when you hear the words "really funny joke," you can't cry when you hear 97,000 preventable deaths every day.
So, right time. I'm hearing you talk about how you used to, in your own city, organize effective altruism kind of group gatherings, and you would be a speaker there, and you would give talks on this particular concept that you've hit upon, that are sort of like bland truths. They're like these realities that don't really kind of get you going emotionally. They don't make you want to do anything about it, because it's like a statistic as opposed to being an immediate felt experience.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Sure. All right, I will talk to Evan this time.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say that maybe my brain skipped just a little bit, but I'm having a hard time thinking of an immediate direction to take this in. And okay, so I've got one. I think I'm enjoying being the listener and finding myself wanting less to talk as this goes on. And there are still thoughts popping up, but I'm remembering when as a child, I mediated conflicts when I was young. I had neighbors who would fight, and I'd be like, come on guys, let's take the middle path. Like, you can both achieve what you want to achieve and not fight about it. So that's where I am.
So you seem to be enjoying the listener role more than the speaker role, and I get the energetic sense this might be somewhat unexpected for you, and yet it also seems to resonate with this experience that you are describing from your past of being a mediator even as a kid among your neighbors.
Yeah, I think you're picking up on how a little earlier on I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so interesting what's being said, but I'm a silent listener right now, and so I can't build upon it. And so it's a little bit of surprise, and it's also a little bit of like, hey, that's kind of cool. Like, I feel like this is something that I could see myself actually doing, and being present as a listener for, disparate people who have disparate ideologies. And I think that I have the ability to be both emotionally resilient and emotionally pragmatic, to the extent that I can be present for people that I don't necessarily agree with in my own worldview.
So I'm hearing you express that this is kind of bringing out something in you that plays to your natural strengths, and that you're really starting to feel that this practice is something you really vibe with, and that you can see yourself as a facilitator for people with different perspectives or disagreements with each other, and that might be something that you're good at.
Yeah, I'm appreciating too that you, I think, are reflecting back well what I'm saying. And the other feeling in me at the moment is I'm feeling a little bit reserved, because I'm not the one to rush into things, and I don't want to be like, oh, like this is for me, like get me involved. I like to kind of step a little more slowly into new things, and meet the people and engage with the ideas before I decide, like, all right, this is something I want to commit to. But at the same time, I without necessarily institutional involvement or something, I see this as a skill set that would just be very useful to have as a person, a system that I could deploy in situations maybe where I'm I don't know, even meeting with family members who don't agree over political things. You know, you could do this in Thanksgiving dinner. So
I heard a few things in there. I think you were saying something nice about my reflections, and I heard you express something that I would kind of feels like you're not a joiner, that you are cautious and skeptical when it comes to fully committing to somebody else's system or exact process or group. But that being said, you to reiterate, you're reiterating how you feel like this is a really useful process or way of listening, and that you think that that's something you could even bring to, say, your family and in conflict.
yeah. So then on my mind as well, just doing a little bit of a stream of consciousness thing, is that I want to slow down a little bit when I'm speaking, because I think there is, and I read this on Edwin's website, it's like, give a couple ideas, don't overwhelm the listener. So I think there is a balance between what the speaker says and what the listener should be expected to be able to reflect back well. And then I would adjust just a little bit what you said about me not being a joiner. It's more that I've been culturally isolated for quite a long time. I haven't used social media for, I don't know, ever really. I never really got into Facebook or anything, and I'm only on Twitter in the past couple months. And I don't want to come off as overeager, is what it is. Even though I consider myself as a sincerely interested person, I don't want to come off as like it being too much about me.
So I'm hearing you express that it's more that you sort of identify as cautious, and you don't want to come across as overeager. Seems like the opposite of cautious to me. And yeah, so you've been socially relatively isolated, and you don't really do social media, and so you haven't really had a sense of in-person community, and so that's part of your caution here too, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and this is a cool experience too, because it allows me to just talk and be myself. And I have one very close friend in my life, and I've got my family, but I see them maybe twice a year. And it's interesting to be doing a Zoom call, which feels pretty human. But I also find myself interested in what this would be like in person, and maybe how much more intense the energy dynamics might be in terms of both the empathy and also potential animosity.
So you're reiterating a bit about the level of isolation you've experienced. You have one good friend in your family, but you don't see your family that often, and you're really vibing on the sense of connection you're getting here. And then you're also kind of wondering about, well, if it's this intense, like over Zoom, what is it like in person?
Yeah. Tiny little adjustment is not too intense right now, I think, but I think it would be more intense in person. It's like, it's good right now, but I'm kind of wondering, like a perspective that I have is that screens kind of reduce the dimensionality of experience. You can't quite directly feel other people's energy as much, and you can't quite directly be in the fully dimensional presence of another person through the little flat glass panel on your digital device. And that's a perspective I came to in I think it was my junior year of college. I broke my cell phone and I didn't replace it for like 8 months. And for those months, I was like, oh my God, like the world is so much fuller of a place when you're not looking at a cell phone every hour or something.
So I hear you talking about the way that screens for you seem to like squash the dimensionality of reality down to a lower dimensional projection, and how you broke your cell phone in college and didn't replace it for months, and you really enjoyed the sort of immediate direct interaction that you had with your experience during that time, that it was a lot richer to you. And that ties back into your earlier statements, and you're sort of adjusting my reflection, talking about how it's not so intense now, but you're really kind of wondering, well, without the screens and mediating between us, what would it be like?
Yeah, you got it. So when I was in that place, when I didn't have my phone, I did a lot of sitting around, literally just sitting on a bench, watching people somewhere on campus, or, you know, you go to the doctor's office and you just sit there in the waiting room and you're like, well, this is just what it's like to be a person in the world, you know, without like a pocket supercomputer that can zap my brain with as much dopamine I want at any point in time. And it was cool. I felt like I kind of got off of dependency on a constant feed of media and other stimulation.
So I hear you describing a sort of dopaminergic detox that happened for you through this practice of, among other things, just sitting on a bench and people watching instead of being on your phone and on media all the time, and you know, how that led to a more intense experience of your experience.
Yeah. All right, I feel heard. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you. So I will talk to Edwin.
Listening.
So, you know, something that's come up for me during this, I want to kind of tie this back in to something that that Sahil was talking about way earlier about our experience in a collective presencing circle.
So you want to tie this back to something that Sahil talked about in this collective presencing circle, make the connection?
Yeah, and he brought this up in our conversation just now. So, or I mean, during this session. So, in that collective presencing circle, I found it interesting because he wasn't the only one. Several people reacted, and I think kind of specifically to the way that I was interacting in the circle, by pointing out their experience of a dichotomy between head and heart, or head and embodiment.
So something that people were pointing out was this dichotomy between head and embodiment, and so it's kind of a good topic there.
And specifically, at least it felt to me during that circle that a lot of those thoughts that came up for people there, those reactions that came up for people there, were related to the way I expressed myself, particularly in that circle.
Oh, and that the reaction was people were reacting to how you were expressing yourself.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because I wanted to share this, and I did share it a bit then, but it's also worth sharing now, I think, that I don't actually experience that dichotomy in my own lived experience of life as I live it now. I remember experiencing it before, but I don't experience that dichotomy where there's some sort of discontinuity between thought and feeling and embodied sensation. To me, it's a smooth continuum. So if I feel something complicated, it's going to express in more or less complicated words, but that doesn't mean it's located in my head instead of located in my body.
So it sounds like people were seeing sort of a dichotomy between head and body, and that you don't experience it. For you, you had experienced it, sounds like, earlier in your life, but now it seems to be sort of integrated, and a complex idea, feeling expresses itself in complex thoughts, and probably a simple feeling in simple thoughts.
Right. And so this is related to my impression of what empathy really is. And this is also related to what David was saying about how much more intense this practice could potentially be in person. So I think that empathy is allowing an energetic resonance to manifest in your nervous system that is vibrating in sympathy or harmony with the nervous system of the person speaking.
So you feel that empathy is sort of a resonating with the energies of someone else. You sense their energies in your body, whatever it is.
Exactly. And this points to the difference in our words, empathy versus sympathy, right? Sympathy is maybe more conceptual, like, oh, I get how you must be feeling. And empathy is, I feel what you're feeling.
Yes, you're seeing that being the difference maybe between the concepts of sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is, I get it, I understand it, versus you're kind of sensing it with empathy.
Yeah, and so people in all of these empathy circles and their reflections, especially after we joined the main group, have talked about the cognitive load that they feel with this active listening. And I think that cognitive load I don't mean to sound judgmental, but I think that that might come from using the wrong tool. The best way to listen to someone, in my sense, is not to try to cognitively remember and reflect upon their words, but to feel deeply in your body the sense, the energy of what they're saying. And then it's when it's your turn to reflect back, you just speak from that feeling, and whatever comes out is the reflection.
Okay, so the way you see it, the empathy, the reflection works is not to reflect like all the words that the person has said, but to just listen and feel it in your body. And then when you do the reflection, you're sort of sharing back that feeling that you have in your body that came from what they said.
Yeah, and like, you know, if my background hasn't already outed me as a complete hippie, this statement might. You know, there's a quote that I forget who said it, but humans are not thinking machines that happen to feel. We're feeling machines that happen to think. And so a lot of us, especially in spaces like the Stoa, I think, are overly identified with our cognitive selves. And we sometimes have a hard time, people have a hard time getting out of the way and allowing the fully embodied self to just do its thing.
Yeah, so you're saying that we're not thinking machines that feel, but feeling machines that think, and so we got to get into that felt experience, kind of get out of the way of those feelings, and yeah.
Exactly. And I just, you know, in my own life experience, my own lived experience, it is truly amazing what happens when you begin to operate from this integrated felt sense of being a human animal rather than being a little mind riding around inside of a human animal.
Yeah, so you just see what it had a real impact. Just that you're a human being. As a human being, you're kind of connecting to your felt experience and being connected with that, and sort of sensing your way, feeling your way through the world instead of sort of thinking your way through the world.
Yeah, and one last thought on this is that I do think, like, whatever this skill is that the circles are training us in, I think that's part of it. I think that's something that this tends to bring out in people the more they do it.
Yeah, and that what your goal is of being a feeling being is it actually is helped by what we're doing here through this process. It helps us get into our felt experience, and yeah, you see that maybe is one of the benefits.
Yeah, I feel heard, and I'll see you guys back in the main room.
Okay, thanks. Got 10 seconds. See you. That was really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
A lot of really awesome ideas there, Evan.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is great.
Okay. Yep, we're back. Everyone back?
Yep.
Okay, so we have about 20 minutes. So we'd like to just go, across the screen here, just call on each person to, share for maybe 30 seconds or so, just what your experience was. And I guess I can do the calling.
We're going to have to end about just maybe in 10 minutes because we have another event right after this. We need to talk to the speaker. Yeah.
Then we'll just go for 10 minutes and get as far as we can. Do you want to start, Peter? How was the experience? Anything that you'd like to share?
I was in this main room by myself. So yeah, I was doing something else. So it was wonderful, everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe.
And maybe just is joining us because she's going to plug the event
Okay.
coming up.
So that's Natasha.
Two down.
Two down. Natasha.
Yeah, it was like fatiguing again. I find that the empathy listening muscle is still needing to get exercised, so I get quite fatigued towards the end of this. But I appreciate the opportunity to keep practicing.
Okay, thanks. Shoshona?
Yes, it's interesting. I feel quite the opposite. I'm quite invigorated and find this very life-giving. So I appreciate it. And I really liked the questions today. It forced me to verbally process a situation that I'm in. And the listeners are so skilled, and we're so skilled in my group. It was very enjoyable today. Thank you again for the space, Edwin and Peter.
Thanks. Jane?
Yes, fun times, a little bit fatiguing, yes. Maybe, but it was great to be able to exercise that empathic listening. Yes, thank you very much for the space, and thank you for my group.
Thanks. Maureen?
Yes, it was very lively at moments. There was a lot of humor, and yeah, I think the sharing was, I think it was rich.
Okay, rich sharing. Thanks. Rob?
This was really different for me from the last time because I just came in dead tired, and I actually felt more energized by it than drained, which was unusual. My group was really thoughtful, and we had a good, like, pretty heady discussion, surprisingly. It really went to some abstract places. I enjoyed it.
Okay, thanks. Neza? I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
I think you're speaking to me.
Yeah.
Nissa, I had a great time. This was my first time doing an empathy circle. I really appreciated the space and my group, and I was feeling pretty anxious about it, and hearing that reflected first in the group, and then seeing that anxiety go away was a great experience. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Manu?
Yeah, we had a really magical group, really special energy cultivated, and it's so obvious now when we're really listening or when we're projecting, and I love having that distinction. It's really helpful, and I hope there's more opportunity to practice the empathy circle here on the Stoa. It's really great. Thank you.
Oh, great, thanks. Evan?
So this was yet another awesome experience. I both love the modality, as I've expressed in our circles, and I also love the opportunity to hear the thoughts of other people on the Stoa at some length and depth, and let people explore what's alive for them. That's something I cherish in these circles. So I just want to thank you and thank Peter for having this thing happen.
Yep. Zach?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as usual, it's always really valuable to continue, doing this practice and practicing it as a facilitator in particular. And so I really appreciate my group and their patience, on this Sunday. And I attended my first Stoa event outside of this the other day, and I look forward to continue participating on the Stoa. I really love this community you guys have going here. So look forward to seeing more of you.
Thanks, Zach. James?
Had like a conversation that went from very matter of fact and philosophical to very emotional and spiritual. It was very ranging and rich, and just a really rewarding experience, and has been the third in a series of a wonderful, really enriching, although various levels of energy, and everything is super different, but just coming away with great experiences every time here and learning a lot. So very appreciating, and very much being fed, to borrow a phrase that was used in our group, by this experience. So thank you.
Thanks. Matthew?
I came for the first time today. I will definitely come again. I feel like somebody said there's a muscle that needs to be practiced. Made me kind of think about how we're all sort of generated from the same consciousness. And when you hear another person speak, that they are a mirror in some way. That was cool.
Okay, thanks. Martin?
Yes, I haven't been here for a while. I live in an environment where we've been able to travel all summer, so It's wonderful to be back in a circle, an empathy circle. It's just such a great tool. I really appreciate it being here. Thank you so much, Edwin.
Thanks, Martin. Rachel?
Yeah, practicing that listening muscle, understanding the meaning of that is really crucial. And just being able to listen in this setting, I found it very helpful. And I was also glad to get things off of my chest that the people in my group were receptive to and understood.
Okay, thanks. Ben?
Yeah, the quality of the space for me was kind of gentle, welcoming, unobtrusive, stable, and over time, increasingly becoming kind of tuned to each other. I noticed some frustration at some point, as if there was kind of lack of response. I noticed actually that there's a lot of response and the pace is slower. So, it comes in the next round or the round after.
Okay, David?
I had a great experience. I guess I have to say I really enjoy being a listener. This is my first time doing it, but I found it a really interesting dynamic to sit with the other person and their energy and connect that to your own lived experience and reflect it back to them. And we did a lot of talking about sort of the nature of this way of communicating. There was a metaphor thrown out that it was a certain kind of dance and a lot of other interesting ideas like that. So I'm hoping we can have more of these.
Okay, thanks, Amber.
Yeah, this was really beautiful, and all three have been so different from one another. This one was particularly special in that the sense of empathy, that feeling connection to everyone in my group, was just very alive, and breaking into that sense of hearing the emotion beyond the words, connecting in that emotional way. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Saneb?
This is my third empathy circle, and this circle was a bit different from the others in the sense that the discussion that we had was slightly more conceptual, but very rich. And it was a very interesting experience for me to reflect back something that was so conceptual, and where I wasn't quite sure whether I understood all the nuances that the person was trying to explain. But I think it was also like a great way to learn really about something completely new. So I'm coming out of this process very energized. Thanks for this space.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm learning from this process is that I have to be better at assessing how much of what I'm sending is getting received and kind of adapt appropriately, because I tend to use a lot of conceptual frameworks that not everyone has access to. And if I just keep sending it, it usually doesn't really improve the translation process. So that's been a learning experience.
Yeah, the process is good for learning how to speak better too, to be heard. Sahel?
Yeah, this was also my first time. And when it first started off, it was just completely jarring to me. I thought, wow, this is just so fragmented. This is not a dialogue. This is just people speaking one at a time and someone just taking notes. And I think I sort of began to get into the groove of it by the end. It helped that Edwin was in my group, I think, in a lot of ways. And I feel like there was a lot of talk in our group about, is it better to just repeat it back or just try to absorb it and say it in your own words, and how that's different. And I was just thinking about how it would be great if there was like a nested version of this where the listener would also get to have their thing parroted back. That would also be really cool. Yeah. But it was a really interesting experience.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, it was my first time playing facilitator, and I feel like there was a different sense of responsibility for the group that allowed me to
better tap into the process and be more present, which was actually like a big improvement compared to my last one of these circles. So it was a very good experience, and also took a very brief opportunity to break the frame, as was needed in the spirit of empathy, and that felt like it was worth doing in that moment, and to have that freedom to do that was interesting as well.
Great, thanks. Dean?
Oh, we should close after this one too, Edwin.
Okay, I think that's almost...
We were very lucky in our group that everyone was sharing, and we got quite deep into a sensual space, and it was a very personal space for all of us. And that's the whole point of empathy, is walking in each other's shoes. We walked in each other's shoes today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So sorry we couldn't finish. We just kind of ran out of time here. So hope to get you next time. So Peter, any kind of sounds like you got to close right away.
Yeah, we got to close in about a minute or so. I just want to thank you, Edwin, for running this empathy circle with us. Edwin will be back for the month of November. We'll talk about if it's going to be weekly or bi-weekly, but it's going to be probably the same link. So you just go on the website. I will plug a few events. So we're having this new series at the Stoa, which is pretty cool, called Stoa Provocations. And the first one's going to be the problem with social science. So basically the speaker is going to come in, share some ideas that could be edgy for about 15, 20 minutes. And then we stop the recording and we get a group dialogue with the speaker. They sync in. We're going to do a different certain method. And so that empathy circle skill set is going to really help. And if you haven't taken collective presencing here at the Stoa, Rhea Bach, the inventor of it, does it twice Fridays. It's nice. It nicely complements this modality too, because it's all about sensing into the group dynamic and then speaking when you feel called to speak. So be sure to check that out. And we have an event coming up in 5 minutes called Existential Kink. And maybe Gray is going to be the MC. Maybe, do you want to plug that? If you're still here.
Yeah, I think yes, it'll fit in so well with the idea of working on skills so that you can be a better listener. I think that a lot of the shadow work involved in Carolyn's book Existential Kink is about being able to extend that empathy towards yourself as deeply and strongly as possible. So if you're looking to translate some of the skills that you're looking at in an interpersonal context here and transform them so that they're useful in the personal context as well, I think that it would be a really beneficial session for you all if you're able to stay on your little Zoom window and enjoy that time with us too. So thanks so much for letting me plug that, Peter.
Yeah, it should be a really fun event. All the links are in the chat box. For more events, you can go to stoa.ca. We have a Patreon and a Substack for daily updates. So that being said, hope to see you guys at Existential Kink. And Edwin, everyone, thank you for coming out today.
Thanks. See you next week.